The one hope you can have from a bad season is that perhaps you're going to get a top draft pick and a franchise-changing player. That's probably not going to be the case for the Atlanta Braves now, as their luck was not with them in the lottery. We'll talk about all that and everything happening from the winter meetings on today's episode of Locked On Braves. So let's get into it.
You are Locked On Braves, your daily Atlanta Braves podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, and welcome back to Locked On Braves, part of Locked On Sports Atlanta, where we cover your favorite Atlanta sports teams each and every day. Also part of the Locked On Podcast Network, the #1 sports podcast network. I am your host, Jake Mastroianni. You can follow me on social media at Shortstop Ball. Check out the podcast there at @LockedOn_Braves on X, Locked On Braves on Instagram and TikTok, and wherever else you get on social media and on YouTube as well. Make sure you hit that subscribe button, hit that thumbs up button, leave us a comment down below. Let us know how you reacted to the MLB Draft lottery on Tuesday and everything happening at the winter meetings. And you can help us out on the audio side as well. Just leave a 5-star review on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. Thanks so much for making Locked On Braves your first listen of each and every day. And big shout out to all our everydayers out there who continue to push through this offseason with us. Today's episode, we're going to talk about the draft lottery, the fallout from that, where the Braves are picking, what that means, who could be available to them, who's probably not available to them at this point. We also heard from Walt Weiss at the winter meetings on Tuesday. We'll discuss some of his comments, and a lot of big news did happen on Tuesday from the winter meeting. Some big signings, not necessarily for the Braves, obviously, but we'll discuss all that on today's show, which is brought to you by FanDuel. If you want to be right in the middle of the action this season, visit FanDuel.com and place your NFL live bets all season long. Well, to say that I'm disappointed right now would be a huge understatement. I was genuinely excited, pumped for the MLB Draft on Tuesday. Maybe one of the biggest news items of the offseason for the Atlanta Braves was where they were going to see Doc's card saying trade up. Unfortunately, not a thing in the MLB Draft. But this decision on Tuesday, this draft lottery, I mean, it was something that gave us a glimmer of hope from a bad season and what's to this point been a mediocre offseason. Yes, you've brought back Raisel Iglesias. You traded for Dubon. None of that's really gotten anybody too excited. But this was a moment. This was a chance for this offseason, this season in general, to bring something good. Now, I guess you could say, and we were pretty excited, we jumped on when Drake Baldwin won Rookie of the Year because it gave the Braves the 26th overall pick in the draft. And that is exciting, and that is great. But when you endure a season like we just did, unexpectedly, you're hoping at the very least you're going to get a great pick out of that. And when the Braves having the 6th best odds to get the first overall pick, even if you don't think you're going to get that, you're still hoping at the very least you get a top 6, top 5 pick. And the Braves got the 9th pick in the draft. Pretty much the worst possible outcome for the Braves. They got the 9th pick in the draft when they had very good odds to get at least a top 5 or a top 6 pick. It's just a really big letdown. I was pretty disappointed on the news. Nobody was quite home at the time yet, so they didn't hear me screaming, but I was screaming because I was that upset. Part of that, and we'll get to it in a second with the players who could be available, but there's some really good shortstops available at the top of this draft, and I don't know that they're going to be there for the Braves at 9th overall. Here's how things shook out in the MLB Draft lottery. The White Sox get the top pick. Look, they probably need it, although their farm system's getting pretty good. Followed by the Rays, the Twins, the Giants, the Pirates, the Royals, the Orioles, the A's, the Braves, and the Rockies for the top 10. Now, on a brighter note, the Mets had a chance to get a top 6 pick. When they didn't, they automatically moved back to the 27th overall pick. So that was at least some good news in the draft lottery. I'd have been really upset had the Mets somehow stolen a top 6 pick in this draft. But the Rays are going to get 2 picks before the Mets and Phillies get their first pick in this draft. So that's at least something to hang your hat on. But it's a real big letdown for Braves fans going through the season that we went through, holding on to hope that perhaps out of this you're going to get at the very least a top 5 pick. I know this is going to be hypocritical of me to say, but that little winning streak that we enjoyed at the beginning of September, I'm not too fond of that at this moment. It was great going through it because we got to watch our team win some games, but it also hurt our draft odds a little bit. And I would have liked to have a little bit better odds on this day. Maybe it wouldn't have mattered anyway. MLB still would have put us ninth, but definitely a major letdown. And look, take a step back from it. Braves are going to have 3 picks inside the top 50, 2 picks inside the top 26. They're still going to have one of the biggest bonus pool allotments to spend in this draft. It can still be a very good draft for the Braves, but it is not nearly as good as it could have been. And here's the big one. When you hear me talk about the draft, I've talked a lot about that draft pool money size and how meaningful that is and why I wouldn't give up that 26th overall pick unless you're getting, a big time target. The 9th overall pick last year had a pick value of $6.51 million. By comparison, last year, the 6th overall pick had a $7.56 million slot value. So just that right there from where the Braves odds were, the 6th best odds to where they are, that's about $1 million difference in draft pool money. The 3rd pick last year had $9.5 million slot value. So now you're talking about $3 million difference between pick 3 and pick 9, where the Braves are. And then the 1st overall pick last year was over $11 million slot value. Now, I weren't necessarily expecting that, but still, you can see very quickly the difference between picking in the top 5 and picking in the back half of the top 10 is a big difference in money for the draft, to use in the draft. And what we've been talking about, the potential with this draft pick and how combined with what the Braves have with their 26th overall pick, you combine, what you're projected to get for the 9th overall pick with what you're projected to get for the 26th overall pick. And you don't even have more money than the 1st overall pick has for slot value. And of course, you can use this money to spread it out. You don't have to use it on that pick for, when you pick that player, but you can use it to spread it out. And so we've been talking about the idea if the Braves were to get a top pick, they were, to get 4th or 5th pick, they could then maybe have the resources and the money to buy a prospect down, that they could outpay them from what picks 2, 3, 4, those teams maybe could give those guys. That's pretty much out the window now. That is pretty much not relevant at this point. It still is to some degree because you have the 26th overall pick. So for instance, like I said, combining those 2 picks, is around $10 million. That's more than what, picks 3, 4, and 5 are going to get. So maybe you can convince some of those guys to fall back to 9, but you're not going to spend all of that because you still want to get a good player at 26th overall. And here's the other thing too. When you look at the potential picks, and then I haven't completely dissected this draft yet. I only really know about the guys that I cover in the SEC for college baseball. So I haven't gone too deep in this class. I've heard this is a really good class, but I really wanted one of those shortstops. You look at MLB Pipeline's rankings right now for the 2026 draft, their top 4 are all shortstops. And generally shortstops are the better players. They're going to rank higher, but you're talking about Roch Cholowsky, a guy that could maybe come in and be a year away from being in the big leagues. Justin Lebron, who might not be all that far away himself. A couple of high school guys in Grady Emerson and Jacob Lombard. Some really, really talented players at the top of this draft. And it's really difficult to see any of them dropping now to the Atlanta Braves at 9 or even having the ability to try to buy one of those guys down at number 9. I think your only shot is if Justin Lebron just has still struggles with the bat a little bit. If he doesn't make any strides offensively from his sophomore year to his junior year, I could see LeBron falling down a little bit and being there at the Braves. I saw where AA in the comments said that Baseball America still has the Braves taking Jacob Lombard at 9. That would be great. And look, a lot's going to change between now and when the draft happens through spring season, high school, college seasons. A lot's going to change. Guys are going to shift. But you felt pretty confident about those 4 guys at the top of the draft and at least getting a shot at one of them. And falling all the way back to 9th means you might not even get an opportunity to draft any of those guys. And if you don't draft any of those guys, you look at some of the names behind them. And again, haven't gone too deep into some of these. I do know Derek Curiel for LSU. Watched him a lot. I do really like his bat. I don't think he's quite into that, Dylan Cruz type of level, that type of bat also coming out of LSU is the only reason I draw that comparison there. And he did play center field. But I do like Derek Carrillo. But I don't even know if he's going to fall to the Braves at number 9. Again, a lot's going to change. Some people like the Burris kid out of Georgia Tech. I know myself, Lindsay, we're not as high on him, but just because of the proximity, some people are going to point to that. Outside of that, you're looking at some high school pitchers, which are really risky. You're looking at maybe Liam Peterson from Florida, pitcher that I do really like, but it's just not all that exciting when you're talking about a top 10 pick. I don't think it's a guy that's going to be an ace level type of pitcher. And when you're getting a top 10 pick, you'd like to take a big shot on somebody you think is going to have a huge impact. So it's a really disappointing because of all that, because you thought you were going to have a shot at a real franchise changing type of player. Because that's what I think Cholowsky, LeBron, Lombard, and Emerson all can be. And maybe Curiel too. I'd consider throwing him in that mix, but definitely those top 4 shortstops. You had a chance to get a franchise changing type of player. And now I don't know that you will with where the Braves ended up picking. But as I said, a lot of time between now and then. I'll be doing some deep dives. We'll obviously be talking a lot more about the draft this spring and leading up to the draft with where the Braves are going to be picking. Hopefully somebody else is going to emerge that we can look at that number 9 spot that is really going to be a difference maker. I know a lot of you are probably already thinking that the Braves are just going to take a underslot guy with that 9th overall pick and try to spread it out. And they may do that. And if you don't find somebody that you absolutely love with that 9th overall pick, it's not the worst strategy, but it's also a little boring. And you'd like to see them when they get a top 10 pick, which they haven't had in a while since they took Shea Langolier's 9th overall back in 2019. They haven't since the last time they had a top 10 pick. And that was just because they didn't sign their top 10 pick the year before that in Carter Stewart. You would like to see them, take a shot on somebody that can be a franchise type of player. But you're really only going to get that in the top 5, and the Braves didn't end up there thanks to the lottery. So a very disappointing day, but again, still has the potential to be a really good draft for the Atlanta Braves. So I can't wait to discover and talk about more of these players that could be available at number 9 leading up to the draft next year. All right, we will get into some comments from Walt Weiss, Acuña at leadoff, Dubon at shortstop, what to do with Ronaldo Lopez and Grant Holmes. We'll get into those comments here next. NFL Sundays move fast, one big play, and suddenly everything feels a little different. That's what makes live betting with FanDuel so exciting. You're not just watching the game, you're reacting to it in real time. With FanDuel, you can place bets as the action unfolds. Every drive, every momentum swing, every highlight moment. Live betting is best when the game starts to shift, a receiver gets hot, a defense tightens up, or the momentum flips after a turnover. FanDuel lets you jump into the moment with live spreads and money lines adjusting instantly. Or if you're already looking for those World Series odds, what happened with some of those big signings today? The Braves moved down a little bit. They went from plus 1,900 to plus 2,000 for World Series odds next year. The Dodgers, who signed Diaz, they're still the front runner up there. And you can see all those odds at FanDuel.com. They obviously have college football playoff odds out there. The national championship favorite right now is Ohio State, followed by Indiana and your Georgia Bulldogs. You can see all that there at FanDuel.com. Also, make sure you visit FanDuel.com/playsafe for tools and resources to help you stay in control of the way that you play. So if you want to be right in the middle of the action this season, visit FanDuel.com and place your NFL live bets all season long. FanDuel, the game moves fast, and so can you. Thank you for making Locked On Braves your first listen of the day. And thank you for making Locked On the #1 sports podcast network. If you're a true diehard Braves fan, the Everydayer All Access tier is built for you. You'll get one-on-one text access with me and Lindsay, all access episodes from me and Lindsay, an exclusive newsletter, and a 15% discount to the Locked On merch store. Head to lockedonbraves.supercast.com to join the Everydayer Club and unlock all access. You can also find the link in the show notes below. Getting back into the winter meetings, updates and news from Tuesday, we had Walt Weiss speaking, the new Atlanta Braves manager. That still took me off guard a little bit. It's still new to me. When somebody said comments from Atlanta Braves manager Walt Weiss, took me a second to realize, that happened. Acuña at the leadoff spot was the discussion with Walt Weiss. Mark Bowman of MLB.com quoted him as saying he's open to Acuña moving back to the leadoff spot. He understands, there's a lot that goes into that, and the the allure of putting Acuña in the leadoff spot and what that means for when a pitcher has to flip the lineup, that you immediately have to face somebody that can crush you in Acuña, but also admits to the fact that you can put him in a third spot for more run production. I think it's all going to be dependent on who they bring in. We talked about it last year. Without Acuña, there's just not an ideal leadoff hitter, especially without Acuña and without Profar for the beginning of last year. There just wasn't an ideal leadoff hitter. You could put Profar in the leadoff spot just because of his walk rate and the fact that he's going to get on base. It wouldn't be the worst leadoff hitter in the world. But outside of that, there's not anybody on this team right now that I can see even contemplating to put in that leadoff spot. It's not going to be Ozzie. It's not going to be Michael Harris. It's not going to be Olsen, Riley, Baldwin. It's not going to be Dubon. So there really is nobody else that I can see that fits that leadoff spot outside of Acuña and Profar. You can maybe go Profar, Acuña, Olsen, Riley. I mean, wouldn't be the worst thing in the world. You could even go Profar, Olsen, Acuña, Baldwin, Riley. You could do something like that. I still think Acuña's going back to leadoff spot. Depending on what happens the rest of this offseason, I think at least to start the year. And Weiss said that he's going to talk to Acuña about it, which, thank you. I mean, I know people are going to be upset that you shouldn't have to give your star player preferential treatment. But if he feels more comfortable in the leadoff spot, he's your best player. Put him in the leadoff spot. I know there are a lot of comments last year about when he got moved to the 3-hole that maybe he wasn't happy about it. That's all just conjecture and speculation. Nothing's been said about that. But if he does feel more comfortable in the leadoff spot, put him in the leadoff spot. Because one, I think he is your best leadoff hitter, the best candidate you have to be the leadoff hitter. And if that's where he likes to play, then put him there. It's that simple for me. Another question about Dubon at shortstop, and Weiss said that he'd be comfortable if it ends up being the case that he is your everyday shortstop. You know, what else is he really going to say about that? I still think they're going to continue looking for shortstops, including one that we'll talk about later in the podcast. We did have a little bit of news on who the Braves are talking to. This one from David O'Brien of The Athletic. Weiss is excited about what new coach Anton Richardson can do to help improve Braves base stealing, and said he always expected Acuña would be likely ready to run more in his second season after his second ACL surgery. He's been encouraged by Acuña's winter league stats. Yeah, I would imagine you'd have to be. So I'm excited about that as well. You know, all my everydayers who have been with me, how frustrated I've been by the Braves' lack of base running and base stealing with the new rules in the game. I feel like you've had some players that should be able to take advantage of that, and they just can't because they're so bad at stealing bases. And so hopefully Richardson helps with that. And with Acuña, you know, kind of more of a full go and no stop signs, we see him getting back. Can he steal 40 bases? I mean, he can steal whatever he wants. But I think we see Acuña be a little bit more aggressive, and hopefully we see guys like Ozzie, like Michael Harris and Profar and others, you know, Dubon, if he's, you know, the everyday shortstop, seeing those guys stealing 15, 20 bases. I think they're certainly capable of it. So I'm excited about that. Weiss also had glowing remarks for Tim Hires. I know that probably didn't make a lot of Braves fans very happy, but, you know, said he's very impressed with Tim Hires, excited what he can do in a second year with the Atlanta Braves. So look, I'm excited too. I think they finally started to come around to it at the second half of the season. Of course, it helped once you got Acuña and Profar back in the lineup together. But I do think if they continue to take the Tim Hires approach to be more well-rounded, not just take pitches, but have a game plan, you know, still draw your walks, be patient, all of that. But last year it was more just taking pitches for the sake of taking pitches instead of just having a good approach at the plate and having some sort of game plan. And that's why you still saw too many strikeouts. So if they can kind of mold all of that together and not completely take away from the power, sit on good pitches, but then be able to battle in an at-bat until you find another pitch that you can hit, then I think we have something here with this offense. I still think this lineup is super talented and has the ability to be a really good offense, but they got to buy in more to what Tim Hires is preaching, or at least what it seemed like he was trying to preach last year, that kind of took with some players, including Matt Olson, who we saw, you know, big adjustment from. Obviously, Ozuna, you saw the walks from him. It's really just Michael Harris that was completely stubborn and just continued not to take his walks or take any pitches. And then the final one here, Walt Weiss talked about, you know, Holmes, Lopez, all those guys, and Elder. Weiss Also praised Bryce Elder, who's out of options, and Hurston Waldrop, whose ceiling is quite high, and said Ronaldo Lopez is a nice fallback option for a return to the bullpen. But the plan is for him and Grant Holmes to be stretched out to start spring. So not reading too much into that comment. And this is where I've been all along with it, that if anybody's going to go to the bullpen, it should be Lopez. I think he gives you the best chance to gain a high leverage reliever. Let's say Joe Jimenez is delayed to start the season, but you feel like you are going to get him back. Lopez could fill his role until Jimenez is ready. Hopefully at some point Jimenez is actually ready and will pitch again. I think that's a very likely outcome, but both of those guys are going to get stretched out in spring training, and we'll just see how everything unfolds in spring training, who actually stays healthy. I think if everybody were healthy to begin the year, with Elder being out of options too, I think you could move Lopez to the bullpen at least to start the season. And then when a rotation spot comes up, you move him back in the rotation. But again, we'll see how all that shakes out during spring training. All right, there was a lot of news from Tuesday, not necessarily for the Braves side of things, although they did have a pretty significant minor league signing we can all get excited about. We'll talk about that, who the Braves are showing interest in, and some of the big news from the day at the winter meetings. All that here next. The World Cup is coming back to North America for the first time since 1994. And with 48 teams for the first time ever, it's going to be massive. But let's be honest, getting tickets is usually the hardest part. That's why the Game Time app comes in clutch for you, finally giving fans a real advantage when it comes to snagging seats. With Game Time, you can track price drops in real time, get alerts when great seats open, and buy tickets the moment they hit the app. It puts the power back in your hands and makes going to the World Cup realistic instead of impossible. I use Game Time all the time. I tell you about Game Time all the time because it really is the only ticketing app that I go to nowadays. I used them to go to a couple of Braves games last year. I used them to go to a college football game this offseason. Now I'm starting to look at them for some concert tickets coming up in the spring. You can get pretty much anything that you need there on the Game Time app. So take the guesswork out of buying World Cup tickets, event, match, concert tickets, all that with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONMLB. You're going to get $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, download the app, make an account, and use code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. Swipe, tap, ticket, go. Game Time. Thank you again for making Locked On Braves your first listen of the day. Getting into some of the news from the day at the winter meetings. This one happened just after I finished recording, actually after me and Lindsay finished recording on Monday night for some of our bonus content, which I'm really excited about. If you're part of our Everyday or All Access tier there, you should be getting that bonus content. But right after that finish, the Braves announced that they signed James Karinchak to a minor league deal. Right-handed pitcher, 30 years old, career 3.10 ERA and 1.18 whip over 165 and 2/3 innings, a 14% walk rate is not fantastic, but a 36.3% strikeout rate is elite. A 181 expected batting average against. Nobody was hitting this guy back when he was healthy, but unfortunately, he hasn't been healthy in over 2 years. He's began with some shoulder inflammation in 2022. Was able to pitch some in 2023, but the shoulder issues came back in the beginning of 2024. He started that year on the injured list and then was eventually outrighted by the Guardians. The White Sox picked him up on a minor league deal last year. And yes, the White Sox eventually released him. Now, the numbers were pretty good at AAA. He had a 2.45 ERA in 29 1/3 innings. With a K/9 of 10.43 and a batting average against of just 200. So really the same stuff that you saw at the big league levels. Nobody could really hit him. He was getting a bunch of strikeouts, but he walked over 6 batters an inning. So the walk issues are still there. But again, nobody's hitting this guy. Never really has. He's only thrown more than 40 innings in a big league season once. So again, staying healthy is a real issue. He has 15 career saves, so he gives you somebody else with closing experience at the big league level, which is tough to get on a minor league deal like this. The stuff is great, but the command and the shoulder issues have cost him from having a great career. His four-seamer averaged just 92.7 miles per hour in the minors last year, but it has great vertical movement of 20 inches, had an expected batting average against of just 177, and a 27% whiff rate for a four-seam fastball is pretty good. So the fastball, despite the low velocity gets a lot of swing and miss, and because he couples it with a really good knuckle curveball that had a whiff rate of 33.8% at AAA last year. Look, I know we're all tired of seeing the budget deals, but this is a good one. This is one worth talking about because there is potential here with Karinchak if he can stay healthy and if he cannot walk everybody. The stuff is absolutely unhittable. I mean, that's what you see even in the results last year. Guys don't hit him. And so if you can keep him healthy, have him throw enough strikes, this could be a big steal in the bullpen, and you're getting him for virtually nothing. So there's no reason to be upset about this deal. It is one that could potentially be a great one for the Atlanta Braves. Apparently, the Braves have shown some interest in Willie Castro. A report on that. That to me only makes sense if Dubon is your shortstop and you want to get some more insurance at the position for Willie Castro. Or as we talked about with Brennan Donovan, you just want to go all out and have the best bench. Sure, that's fine. Obviously, it depends on the price. I'm not all that high on Willie Castro offensively, but it's another guy, it'd be an upgrade from Vidal Brujan is basically what you would be doing, is upgrading your bench depth. I'm not willing to pay a ton for that, but I do think it would most certainly mean you're not getting another shortstop and that you're just getting Castro to be your backup shortstop for Dubon. Buster Olney said that he gets a sense from Alex Anthopoulos and from what he's hearing from other agents that the Braves are all in on pitching. He said pitching 3 times, pitching. I don't know if somebody shows up when you do that, but that's a bit of a letdown for me. Look, I want pitching. Don't get me wrong, especially relief pitching. It's my number one priority right now. But in that discussion with Buster Olney, and I forget the name of the guy that he was talking to on the podcast, but the other guy had mentioned maybe trading for Corey Seager. And he said Sean Murphy and J.R. Ritchie for Corey Seager. Not, yes, do that deal in a heartbeat. Absolutely do that deal. You're talking about getting a guy like Corey Seager. If that's what it takes, you do that deal now. I don't think that's what it takes. And I don't know that the Rangers are going to trade Corey Seager. But beside the point, Buster kind of brushed that aside and said that he's hearing pitching for the Atlanta Braves is what they're going after. And again, I'm not going to be disappointed if you go out and get a mid-rotation starting pitcher and you get a shutdown reliever. And if that's your offseason, okay, it's fine. But for me, again, you've been following me all offseason. I still want those bats. Whether it's a big bat or you just improve the depth. I still need some improvement for the offense. What we've witnessed the last 2 years, there needs to be some sort of influx to boost that lineup and get them going. I can't sit back and hope that guys are going to get back to their norms for a third straight year. I can't hope that. I want to see a boost to this offense. So that was a little bit disappointing to hear. Now for the big news of the day, Kyle Schwarber back to the Phillies on a 5-year, $150 million deal, $30 million a year for a DH going into his age 33 season is wild, but Kyle Schwarber has been that good. Now this is going to hurt the batting average crowd, but he hasn't hit above 248 in the past 4 years. But you know what he has done? He's hit at least 38 home runs and driven in at least 100 runs in each of the last 4 years. So he is definitely worth it. You feel like he's probably going to age pretty well with his ability to get on base and hit home runs. Again, he's never going to hit for a high average, but what he does well, he does really, really well. Was hoping he wouldn't go back to the Phillies. The Orioles apparently matched that offer, which tells you they have plans to spend big somewhere this offseason to turn their team around. So that must be nice. The Reds also offered 5 years. Don't know where they were monetarily, but they were definitely in there. Again, was hoping that he would shun the Phillies and go somewhere else out of the division, but you always felt like they were never going to let him get away what he means on the field and what he means in that clubhouse. However, another NL East rival, they did get shunned by a former star in Edwin Diaz, who turns down the Mets and goes to the Dodgers for 3 years, $69 million. Of course, it has some deferrals in it. Apparently, the Mets weren't willing to go to 3 years for Edwin Diaz, which is just very surprising. I don't know what's going on with Steve Cohen over there. Is he starting to get a little bit more hesitant on some of these deals now? I don't know, but definitely did not see that coming. Edwin Diaz leaving the Mets. Of course, they already did have Devin Williams, so they have their closer, but you always just kind of assumed they were going to stockpile and get both he and Diaz, but now he goes to the Dodgers. The Pirates signed Gregory Soto for 1 year, $7.75 million. I had mentioned Gregory Soto, I think it may be my dream offseason podcast that I did, as being kind of that dominant lefty with the big stuff for the postseason. When you're facing a tough lefty in a postseason game, assuming the Braves get there, which you can't just make that assumption nowadays. So 1 year, $7.75 million. I mean, that's pretty fair value for a guy that's really should only face lefties, but a pretty good lefty specialist. Good for the Pirates. Von Grissom was traded to the Angels for outfield prospect Isaiah Jackson, the Angels' 25th overall prospect. So former Brave on the move, going to the Angels. Hopefully he gets a shot to play there. Steven Matt signed a 2-year deal with the Rays. The Tigers have shown interest in Ha-Sung Kim, which makes some sense, because right now I think they have Zach McKinstry there, and Javi Baez are their options. And their top prospect, Kevin McGonigal, is viewed more as a second baseman long-term. So if they don't think he's going to stick at shortstop, it could make some sense for them to try to shore up their shortstop position with Ha-Sung Kim. See what that means. Is the only other team that I've heard rumored so far to be interested in Ha-Sung Kim. The Ketel Marte rumors are apparently picking up, as well as the Edward Cabrera trade rumors. So we usually see another deal or two late on the final night of the winter meetings, which is tonight, Tuesday night. So I wouldn't be surprised if we see some other deals going down after I get recorded or finish recording here, because that's the way that it usually happens anyway. There is a report now that the Giants have shown interest in Brendan Donovan. I think every team has shown interest in Brendan Donovan, which is why the Braves are not going to get him. And the Cubs and several other teams have met with Alex Bregman. So perhaps his market's starting to take shape. Thanks so much for those joining me here live tonight. We got Jeffrey Humphreys, Mass Boost, some of my everydayers in here. B-Man, thank you for joining. David Thatcher, haven't seen you in a little bit. Thanks for being here as well. Appreciate all the comments. Thanks for all you showing up. Over 130 people here tonight as well. Z Corp, Alpha, Truth in here. Truth Hurts. Appreciate you joining and being part of the conversation. You haven't already, hit that thumbs up button down below. Thanks so much for tuning in to Locked On Braves. And unless something major breaks in the next 36 hours or so, we'll be back on Thursday discussing everything that we learned from the winter meetings. Make sure you subscribe and follow Locked On Braves so you get all the latest episodes. Again, check us out on Shortstop Ball, myself, the podcast at _Braves on X, Locked On Braves everywhere else. And did Locked On Braves make your Spotify Wrapped? Prove it on social medias to secure a free month of our brand new Everydayer Club. Just tag our national Locked On Podcast Network account on any social media platform, and we'll drop you a code. Be one of the first to join the Everydayer Club to get your favorite show ad-free and exclusive access to the members-only Discord channel. So make sure, if you haven't already, go do that. I know a lot of you already tagged me in some posts on Spotify and YouTube as well. Make sure you do that to the main Locked On Podcast Network social accounts, and you'll get a free subscription to the Everydayer Club. All right, that will do it for this episode of Locked On Braves. Again, make sure that you rate, review, and subscribe to the Locked On Braves podcast wherever you get your podcast, and we will talk to you next time.